Okay, welcome to the next section of this tutorial, and this is where I'm going to show you guys how to weave in the ends. So as you can see, we're currently looking at the back of the project. So these are all the places where I've picked up yarn. You can see the back of my black border edges, and I've woven in the ends here, I've woven them in here, and I've woven them in on most of the bottom triangles. I have not woven in the ends on any intersections that I have not gotten to yet, and I'll talk about why in a minute. So today, we're going to focus basically on two ends here. We're going to focus on this one, which is going to come out of that triangle, and that was the cast on edge, and I'm going to show you guys how I will weave that in. And we're going to focus on this section over here. And I chose this one because it has the lightest yarn, so it's the easiest to see, but I do apologize for the ramen yarn. So we're going to talk about how I weave in this intersection. I do apologize, don't mind me. I've already started another square. I just wanted to record this before the lighting got too dark today. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so I am starting with my cast on edge, and this was the self-striping block that I'm really unsure about because of one of the stripes is black, but we're going to let it go. So I've already threaded my needle onto my yarn, and I'm going to hold it so that I'm looking at the wrong side of the work and the edge is near the top. And what I do is with my needle, I take this from the very edge, and I'm going to thread the needle directly under two purl bumps that are right in a row. Then I pull the needle through. Then I will do the same thing in the opposite direction. I will thread it through these two purl bumps. Oops. And pull the needle through. And then again, these two. These two. I will do this several more times until I've done maybe 5 or 6 rows, maybe up to 7. I think I'm going to do 6 at this moment. And what I've created is a small ridge where the yarn goes like this. All I do next is I turn my work, and I'm going to take my needle and just thread it very carefully, not under the stitches, but only under the wraps of yarn that have gone across, and pull it through. And then I turn it back around and I go under just 1 or maybe 2 stitches, and that's where I cut it. This anchors extremely tightly. Now you can feel it, but as you sort of pull it out, it relaxes and it's less evident. This is from the back, this is from the front, so you really can't tell that it's there. There we go. So that's how I do these ends, these cast on edges here. And next up, I'm going to show you guys how to do the intersection. So the first thing that you notice at this intersection is, of course, that you have 4 threads. The reason for this is you have 1 thread from the block below you. In this case, that's the green. You have 1 thread from the block to your right, which is going to be this purpley blue, and you have 2 black threads. Those are both from this row, okay? All the black threads from this one ended up over here, from this one ended up over here, and likewise, the gray thread cast on starts over here, the red was over here, so all of your threads from this are going to be just your 1 thread from the block below, and then both black ends and 1 end from the block on the right. So to start with, please take your black ends, and I strongly encourage you just to tie them in a knot. Because since the black edge is only 2 rows, it's going to be pretty rickety and it's going to pull itself out. I tie it in a knot after I've stitched this because if I tie it in a knot beforehand, it's more difficult to pick up stitches for this one. That's one of the reasons that I save my ends until the end. The other reason that I save weaving in my ends until the end is because this is the intersection from the front, okay? So you can see how we still have our green on the bottom, pink on the top. Of course, the right and left have switched because that's how physics works. But if you focus in here, let me see if I can get this to Not sure how much you can see it, but there's a hole right there. Okay, you can sort of see an edge of the green peeking through. There is a hole in the black border. That comes when you pick up the black border above it. There we go. That's better. So the only extra step that I take when I weave in my ends on this side is, first of all, I'm going to hold the green one out of the way. So I'm going to start with a black end, and remember that you have knotted those two black ends together, and I just close up this little intersection. So I'm going to catch one from the top, this little loop here, right there. Come on now. There we go. And I'm going to catch one from the bottom, so I catch those two loops. I pull it through. I'm going to scoop the thread that I just pulled through and go right over to this side and just pick up a stitch or two next to it. I'm not particularly meticulous about this. I'm just trying to anchor the entire intersection and close up that hole. Okay? I don't necessarily do it exactly the same way every time. My goal is just to make it closed. Now, because it is a garter ridge on the other side, it's not really going to show that much if your yarn goes through, because it'll just look like a purl bump. Okay? So after I've woven in and I've closed up that intersection, I'm just going to start weaving in the end. And the way that I do that is I just hook onto all of these black purl bumps, okay, all the way across. I'm not going to do, all of them, but a decent amount. And then I anchor my yarn through a couple of gray purl bumps. Just a few, because it might start to show through if you do too many. So I do the same couple, and I just cut it. Again, there's not a particular formula to how I'm doing this. It's just a strategy that I use. So after I have anchored that one black end, again, I pull my other ends out of the way, and I do the same thing with this one. I'm just gonna anchor it in both sides of the intersection, and then just spiral it down one of the purl bump edges. It doesn't really matter which one you do. I often will anchor it into perhaps the darker side, so in this case I think I'm going to anchor it into the purple. And if you'll notice, this is my picked up edge, so you can go straight through that. That is not going to show on the other side, and that can be very easy to anchor it into. Snip. There you go. The next step is to do your two main color yarns. So I do both of these in basically the same way, which is that I focus on this picked up edge. Okay, it looks like a series of V's, and that came from when you picked up the next row of black out of it, right? It sort of bent into the back. And what I do is I pick a side and I just trace it. So first of all, I'm going to bring my yarn through the black to get it over there. Okay, I'm going to trace the V's. So this strand here comes out like that and then goes under. So I'm going to do exactly that. Then it comes out and it goes under. Do that again. And it comes out and goes under. And I'm going to do this all the way down. I'm just tracing one side of the V's. I'm going to cover up part of where I anchored my black. And when I feel like I've traced enough V's, I have two options. I can either anchor it in the purl bumps, the way that I did before, or anchor it in the cast off, or the picked up stitches, the way that I did before. This time I think I'm going to do the cast off stitches, but you know what? It looks like I picked up one of the pink purl bumps as well, and that's fine. So those are the main two ways that I weave in my ends, is by anchoring off through the purl bumps or the cast on stitches. I use them a little bit interchangeably, but I don't have a particular method to it. I only have one more end to weave in at this point, and that is my lovely green ramen yarn. So same thing, except this time I have two possible cast on edges to go down. I'm going to pick this one, or excuse me, pick up edges. So in this case, it almost like goes in and then goes down. So I'm just going to do that. You just sort of follow whatever the V does. Follow that side of the V. Okay? So it comes out and goes in, comes out and goes in. So I'm going to follow this one. I just come out and now I'm going in and I'm coming out. So now I'll go in. I'm just going to go down until I feel like I have gone a sufficient amount. Stupid ramen yarn. Yeah, well, I'm going to stop here because that's how I decide that. This time I'll anchor in the purl bumps so that you guys can see what I do there. It is the same thing that you've already seen though. I will tell you, anchoring in the purl bumps can be a little bit difficult if you have like perhaps a self-striping or something like that. Do make sure that you are anchoring in the right color, okay? It does not often show through, but occasionally it shows through. Okay, so I'm just going to snip this end again and turn it over. And so this is my intersection. You can see that you can't really see anything. I didn't close it up 100% here. Maybe I could have closed it up a little bit better. But that's it. That's my intersection. So I know by feeling on the back, there's a black yarn anchored there. I know, let's see, that there's a purple yarn anchored over here, and that the green yarn is anchored over here. And that's all I can know. And that's only because my fingers are in the back. So this is my intersection. That is how I weave in my ends, and I turn this into this on the back. As you can see here, as I've started another square so that you can see, I now have, as soon as I started another square, I got my 4 strands. Over here, I have the 1 strand from the brown and green and blue, and then I have 2 strands from the black over here, as well as one of these orange and yellow strands. So I will weave in those 4 ends. Each intersection will have 4 ends. In terms of end management while I'm waiting, I do always weave in my cast on ends. But if it's getting in the way, if it's a particularly long end, I will sometimes temporarily knot the black ones just so that they're out of the way and it stops unraveling. Or if it's very long, I will sometimes just thread it through a couple of times through its own block. Just big basting stitches like that. Oops, like that. So that it's out of the way. Now this one's plenty short, so I don't need to do that. But if you're finding that the ends are getting in your way, that is one technique that you can use. But in general, that is how I weave in my ends. And there will be one more segment in this series, or possibly 2. I'm going to show you guys how I square off my edges. So if I wanted this to be the edge of my blanket, how would I do the square here? The thing is that I haven't decided where I want the edge of my blanket to be, so I don't know when that one will come out. And then eventually, when I get around to finishing my blanket, I will show you how I'm going to do my finishing black edge around the side. So thank you guys very, very much for tuning in to this, the 4th installment. Hopefully it has been informative for you, and I look forward to seeing what blankets you come up with. All right, bye!